Hello, Nick family. Welcome to my channel, Dope Soul Sports Talk, a member of the NBK Network. Today, I want to talk free agency, the Knicks being active in the free agency market, possible re signing of Mitch. I've heard reports about that. And then, of course, I want to delve deep and give you my takes on Jalen Brunson. So let's get to it. The Knicks have cleared $30 million in cap space. If they waive Taj Gibson, who has an unguaranteed contract of $5 million, they will then have close to $35 million in cap space when free agency starts Thursday at 6 p.m. And for those of us who are Taj Gibson's fans, not to worry, the Knicks can re-sign him on a veteran's minimal contract, and it will not count toward the salary cap. So let's see what happens with that. I do believe Taj Gibson will be back. I don't think the Knicks clearing cap space is only for Jalen Brunson. As per Ian Begley of SNY, NBA teams also don't think Brunson is the only move the Knicks will make. So I'm anticipating the Knicks will be active in the trade market. Let's see what happens. I want to talk a little bit about Brunson. So the Knicks have cleared about, as I talked about, $30 million in cap space. And by all reports, Brunson is their top target. And I think the fan base is split on them on Brunson. I've seen it in on Twitter. I've seen it, in the chat when I'm hosting a show on this channel, Dope Soul, on Nothing But Knicks. People in the chat, they not a believer in Brunson. But let's get into it. The Knicks can offer Brunson a max deal of 4 years, $131 million, starting at $30.5 million a year. I don't think that's going to happen. Most reports is that it's likely a 4-year deal between 105 and 110 million dollars. And just to give some context, Van Vliet signed a 4-year, $84 million contract a few years ago. But as Big Pun said, yesterday's prices are not today's prices. You cannot expect to sign a player now in 2022 for the same amount of money you signed a player in 2020. It's just not going to happen. And I'm talking about a comparable player. There are reports that Van Vliet is about to sign a 4-year, $110 million extension, right? So let's take a look at the salaries of point guards in the NBA starting next season. Now, this might be a little blurry, so let me read it out. So, these are the annual salaries of the point guards next season, 1 through 15. I'm not going to read them all, but I just want to give some context to the discussion. Stephen Curry, number one, 53 plus $1 million next year. Damian Lillard, 44 plus $1 million next year. Luca and Trey, both 42 plus $1 million. They rank third highest in point guard salary next season. Shea Gildress Alexander is seventh at 35 plus $1 million. De'Aaron Fox is ninth at 39 plus $1 million per year. This is next year. Chris Paul at 30 million. D'Angelo Russell, I believe he's in the last year of his contract. He's at 29 plus $1 million next year. Kyle Lowry, 28 plus $1 million. So if the Knicks sign Brunson between 25 and $28 million, he'll be the 14th highest paid point guard in the league next season, right above Terry Rozier, who's making $24 million. So I hope this gives some context to Brunson's salary, because that is one of the main things that I'm hearing about not wanting to sign him, is that it's too much money for a point guard like him. All right. So let's just talk about the criticisms. Number one, he's not a star. I can't argue with you. He's not. He's not a star. He's a piece. Not the piece, but a piece. The Knicks still need to go out and get the piece. And signing Brunson with salary cap space, even in a signing trade, is not going to prevent the Knicks from going out and signing a star when one becomes available. I think that's something that we have to keep in mind. Yeah, ideally, you would have a few stars on the team already, and you're bringing Brunson in as that missing piece. But it's okay to bring him in first and get the stars later if bringing him in doesn't preclude you from doing that. And it doesn't. So we're just getting this piece first. So when people say that another thing people say is that he doesn't move the needle, he doesn't make the team better, he doesn't make us a playoff team. I think that tells us a bit more about the state of this roster than it does about Brunson. Put Brunson on Miami instead of Kyle Lowry. He would be great. Put him, on any team whose roster is better than ours, and you would see the fit. You would see how well he fits on our team. And you would see how well he fits on our team. Our roster is not good right now. Randall is not a number one, in my opinion. Maybe he's a number two if he gets it together. Probably a number three. RJ may be a number one at some point, but he's not a number one right now. We don't have a good roster. So you bring Brunson in as the first piece of many pieces, of many moves that you have to make to become a championship contender. So no, he's not going to make us a perennial playoff team by himself. But you know what? You can bring Donovan Mitchell in here next season. We're not going to be a perennial playoff team. You could bring LeBron in next season. We're not going to be a perennial playoff team if we don't make any other changes. And that's because of the state of our roster. So I would say to the fan base, stop looking for one player to put us over the top. Our roster is not there yet. We have to continue to build, and Brunson or Murray, right, is one piece of that build. And we have to keep building from there. And we already talked about too much money. We looked at the top 15 salaries of the point guards in this league. He would be 14. I think that's okay. The other one is that he's too short. He's not very athletic. Listen, I get it. If you're athletic, it can give you an advantage. But me personally, I'm over discounting players because of they don't have a wingspan, a long wingspan, or because they're not quick, or because they're not tall. And I'm over on and on over a player because he can run and he can jump and he has length. I'm looking for players that can play. That's number one. High IQ players, efficient players, understand the game of basketball, know how to play the game of basketball, know how to play with others, makes their teammates better. And if you happen to be athletic and have length, that's great. And if you don't have it, it's not a detriment. As long as you're crafty, you have the ball handling, you know how to get to your spots, I'm good. And that's Brunson. So I don't have a problem with his so-called lack of athleticism. It's not stopping him from getting in the key. It's not stopping him from finishing in the key. So his athletic or non-athletic attributes, to me, it's not that big of a deal. The other thing is that he's not a good defender. He may not be, but I bet you he's better than Kemba Walker. And when you look at Miami and other teams, but specifically Miami, they were top 5 in defense with Duncan Robinson starting for them. I know he sat at one point during the season closer to the playoffs, in the playoffs, but for most of that season, he was in that starting lineup. And they were a top 5 defense. You can hide one player if the other players are doing what they're supposed to do, and that player who's supposedly a bad defensive player is hitting their spots. Okay. So I think he's going to be fine in that respect as well. And then another thing I've heard is that the Knicks are bidding against themselves, and they're not. They're bidding against Dallas, who went to the Western Conference Finals and can go over the salary cap to sign him. Brunson makes this team better, but he's one, again, of many moves that the Knicks need to make. Now, these are some fair points or concerns. And one of them is that Brunson operated with a lot of space in Dallas. He had floor spacers around him. They played Dorian Finney-Smith at the power forward at times. He can stretch the floor. Their center, I forget his name, he can also stretch the floor. The Knicks are the opposite of that, in my opinion. Mitchell Robinson, Julius Randle, RJ Barrett all play, or at their best, I should say, below the 3-point line. So there is concerns. Is Brunson going to be able to play his game? Is he going to be able to get into the key and do the things that he usually does when the paint is as clogged up as it probably will be with those three players? That's a concern. Now, he's an efficient shooter. He's hitting the three, I believe, at what is it? Last season, he shot it at 37%. But you don't want him relegated to just being a 3-point shooter, right? You want him being able to get into the lane like he does and hopefully pass, get the other players, his teammates easier shots. That's what we're hoping. But that is a concern that we just don't have floor spacers, and how effective can he be on this Nick team with this particular Nick roster and this particular Nick offense, which is not very creative. Hopefully that will change. And I think the other concern that I have is that because a lot of the fans think he's making so much money, that the expectation is that he's going to come in and just take us to another level by himself and be this dynamic player. I think if that's what you're thinking, if that's how you're understanding this move, you are going to be disappointed. That's not Brunson. He he's going to do his part. Don't get me wrong. The leadership is there, his ability to run an offense, his ability to shoot from 3-point line, to get into the key. He's going to do his part. But he's not a superstar. So if you're thinking, "Oh, we're paying him so much money," and you expecting him to play like a superstar, you're going to be disappointed. And I just hope the Knicks fans don't turn on Brunson and now we're hearing the boos and all of that crap. He's not that. It's just like if Marcus Smart was playing on Boston without Tatum and Jalen Brown. He would be a different player because you can't expect him to carry the team. That's not his role. That's not Brunson's role. So the Knicks really need to build and put other players around him for him to really shine. Okay. So I mean, that's it as far as my concerns about Brunson. I really like him. He's a winner. If you haven't already, take a look at his documentary that talks about his high school years. I think up until he signed with Villanova, he's a dog. He's a dog, and we need cats like that on the Knicks. We just do. In terms of his stats, last season he averaged 16.3 points, 4 rebounds, 5 assists. He shot 50% from the field, 37% from three, and 84% from the free throw line. Let me say that again. Because if you watched the Knicks last year like I did, we had a team full of inefficient players. RJ, even though he did take the next step, another step, inefficient. Julius Randle, inefficient. Our wings, when you think about their shooting percentage, somewhere between 39 and 41% each of them. And we were not a good free throw shooting team. And we'll talk about that. I don't know if it's going to get any better with reports that we're bringing in Mitch, who shot like 41% or something like that last season. But he shot 50% from the field, 37% from three, and 84% from the line. He's an efficient player. He's not going to need 69 shots to get 20 points, right? Now, that was during the regular season. In the playoffs, he put up 21.6 points, 4.6 rebounds, 3.7 assists. He shot 47% from the field. Didn't shoot as well in the playoffs from three at 35% and 80% from the free throw line. And he played some of those games without Luka Doncic. And one of those games, he's had 40, he scored 41 points in the playoff game. We saw how our team struggled against Atlanta last year in the playoffs. They were playing some really good teams, and he was able to to score, and the team went to the Western Conference Finals, and he was a big part of it. Okay, so I'm all in. Mitchell Robinson, there's been reports that Mitchell Robinson will sign a 4-year, $60 million contract. Wow. Just wow. You know how I feel about Mitch. I can take him or leave him. I've seen him dominate games where I'm like, whoa, this is the guy. And then I've also seen him be pretty ordinary. He is hoping that what I think is his slow development is due to the fact that he's a late bloomer. Maybe that's why he's developing a bit slow, at least in my opinion. And maybe he needs more time to come into himself in terms of who he's going to be as a player. All right. The Knicks, it seems like, are going to invest $15 million a year over the next 4 years in him. Let's see if he actually becomes that. That's all I got for you today, family. I appreciate you rocking with me. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, hit that notification button so you'll be notified anytime I go live or drop a video. Be easy, Knick family.